Hello, everybody. Welcome to Etched by Wind and Water, Print Media and Multiples of Ktaqmkuk. My name is Luca. I am here on behalf of St. Michael's Printshop, which, as most of you likely know, is a print shop located in St. John's on the harbor. We are just celebrating our 50th year and our second Inkfest, and we're so happy to have you. I am just going to read a quick land acknowledgement and then I will pass uh, it off to Emily here. Before I do that, I'm going to let everybody know that we will have a question period at the end. So feel free to save your questions until then. You can pop them in the chat, but we will read them out and answer them all at the end, most likely. Um, St. Michael's Print Shop recognizes that it resides and conducts activities on Ktaqmkuk and interacts with the unceded territories and lands of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. St. Michael's Print Shop commits to uplift the voices and follow the lead of Indigenous communities, working towards decolonization and to do important anti-racist work in the shop and in our community. St. Michael's commits to confront settler colonialism in an effort to decolonize its space and structure while prioritizing the safety of indigenous people and artists. All right, that's it for me. Take it away, Emily.
Thank you so much, Luca. And thank you so much to folks who are joining us today. I'd say good morning. It's morning for me here in Ottawa, but I imagine for others it is noonish / 1 o'clock. Either way, I'm really happy you could all be here. So just to do a quick introduction of myself, my name is Emily Critch. I'm a Mi'kmaq settler, curator, writer, artist, mostly curator nowadays from Ktaqmkuk, also known as the Bay of Islands in Newfoundland. And within that territory, I'm specifically from Corner Brook. And also, as I mentioned, I'm calling from Ottawa. I am a graduate student doing my master's in art and architectural history and a graduate diploma in curatorial studies at Carleton University. I've been an arts worker now for over a decade in various roles since I was in high school. And, primarily I've been working as an independent curator the last 6 years. Um, and I've been very fortunate to have like a really amazing relationship both through my art practice as a printmaker as well as a curator with St. Michael's Print Shop, which is celebrating their 50th anniversary this year, which is like a really huge milestone for any artist-run center. But to think about an artist-run center positioned in the Humguk, like it's really exciting. We also have Eastern Edge celebrating their 40th, so lots of really cool anniversaries happening right now. So this year, or the past year, and well, this year, St. Michael's 50th anniversary. Um, the past several years, I've been doing research of their print archive, which holds 2 prints from every single artist who's produced an edition at the print shop. Um, and this year, I was asked to curate 3 exhibitions to celebrate the 50th anniversary, which includes Gathering at the Water's Edge, visiting artists of St. Michael's Print Shop, which was at the Tina Dolter Gallery in April. We just recently closed Etched by Wind and Water Print Media of Newfoundland and Labrador, which was at Union House Arts. And upcoming in the new year, at a date TBD, we have Emerging Along Coastal Margins, Don Wright Scholars of St. Michael's Print Shop that celebrates the innovation of emerging artists and folks at early stages in their career who've been recipients of the Don Wright Scholarship. So that's just kind of an overview of what I've been up to the last year and with St. Michael's. And I'm really fortunate today to be joined by past Don Wright scholar Jerry Ropson and master printmaker Jerry Evans, who both of them will introduce themselves a little bit more shortly. But really excited today to talk about, uh, what it means to be from Ktaqmkuk, to be an artist, how that's been shaped, how this place shapes their work, thinking about things like mentorship and um, their relationship with the print shop and more broadly in their practice. So um, it means a lot that my favorite Jerrys could join me today to talk about their work. It's gonna be like pretty informal. Again, I'd ask folks if you have a question, of course, put it in the chat, but we're gonna answer everything kind of at the end just so we can kind of keep a good flow going. But to get things kind of started off, for those joining who aren't familiar with both of you, could you please give us an introduction, including your name, where you're from and where you're currently based, and a small general overview of your artistic practice, perhaps discussing things like themes that emerge for you and your respective practices. And we'll expand on that more as the conversation goes. So, Jerry Robson, would you like to go first? You're unmuted.
Okay. All right. So my name is Jerry Ropson. I am from a rural community in rural northern Ktaqmkuk, called Pollard's Point. Pollard's Point is where I grew up. It's a tiny little community in the shadow of the Long Range Mountains in the bottom of White Bay. And I am currently based in the Tantra Marshes in Ktaqmkuk, Mi'kma'ki, Sackville, also known as Sackville, New Brunswick, where I teach at Mount Allison University. And I make often site responsive installations that are interdisciplinary in nature and in media. I make small scale objects, currently a lot of wood carving and ceramics, but in the past, a lot of drawing, sometimes video, sometimes textiles. Um, that rural community, I think, is the underpinning of a lot of what I do. I make a lot of work about community, ideas of community, and from a sort of decolonial perspective, trying to think about deconstructing ideas of belonging and community and challenge some of those sort of preconceived notions. I make work I always say from a working class perspective or a class conscious perspective. That's really important, considering how I grew up and how the way and the place I grew up sort of informs what I make. I make work often. I like themes of like ritual and religion, the occult. I like a lot of work, a lot of ideas around language and local vernaculars and the way we use language. That's really important. And usually I prefer non-traditional spaces and sites, and that, although I will sometimes find my work in traditional white cube spaces, they're not my favorite. For those who know me, know that I like community spaces. I like union halls. I like outdoor public spaces. I like my work to engage with a public outside of traditional galleries.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jerry.
Thanks.
There's nothing like a good hall installation for me. Oh, love it.
Yeah.
Um, and you, Jerry Evans, if you could introduce yourself for us. You're muted.
Oh,
Mon
Oh, no,
Dieu.
you're
Sorry.
good, Jerry Robson. Jerry Evans is muted, and now he's unmuted. He's good.
good, good.
Deloitte Jerry Evans. My name is Jerry Evans. I'm Mi'kmaq settler ancestry. Originally from Windsor, Central Newfoundland, Grand Falls, Windsor. We moved away from there when I was a kid to the West Coast. Corner Brook with my dad got transferred, and I've been living in St. John's since about age 12, and this became home up until this point, and I'm in the process of trying to get the hell out of here now. But my work, I studied at NASCAD, graduated in 1986 from Nova Scotia College of Art and Design. I went on to do a Bachelor of Education at Memorial University, and having gravitated towards printmaking at NASCAD, I was lucky enough to to have the opportunity that when I came home after graduation, St. Michael's had moved from the community of St. Michael's to St. John's, and that became my home, my place, my studio. And I mean, I'm so lucky to have that. But my work has always been about who I am and where I'm from, my ancestry, this land, this place, my family, my extended family, my ancestors. And I guess to a certain extent, it has always been that kind of based artwork for me, whether it be printmaking, painting, film, in some installation, and yeah, I mean, most of my work is about a part of my ancestry that was denied growing up, my Mi'kmaq ancestry, and um, I mean, it became very important for me when I reached my latter teens and early 20s that you know, it just became a driving force, especially after I was given kind of a license from a great uncle to, you know, pursue those questions and to get answers about who we were, where we were from. We always knew, but I mean, nobody really spoke about it. But I took it upon myself to you know, find out what I could, and in doing so, you know, I've done a lot of research on my own. I did the research about indigenous ancestry and so on here in Newfoundland and Labrador at university, and I spent a lot of time in community around the province, and especially in Mi'kmaq, where I came to meet my wife, and we've raised 5 kids, and we're finally making Mi'kmaq our permanent home in the next all times now in the next in the next few weeks. You know, this house that we raised our kids here in St. John's is now on the market as of today, actually, and
Wow.
it's time to change it up. And I'm looking forward to, you know, having spent many years in the film industry, to which, you know, I have no regrets of, you know, having to take a somewhat full-time job, actually contractual, you know, and it was a great job that worked well for me because, you know, you work so many months of the year on a film project or TV series, and usually in the wintertime, I would spend my time at St. Michael's, you know, back in the studio, or at my studio here at the house, and you know, at my art practice. And but I'm kind of done with the film industry now, which just recently having gotten my first knee replacement, and looking forward to getting the other one done so I can kind of get some normalcy back in my life, because it's kind of been held down the last 2 years, I guess. But yeah, I'm yeah, it's I'll stop it there, because I could probably ramble on about this and that, but yeah, I'll save it.
Yeah, we have lots of other things
Yeah,
to
yeah,
bring up and stuff, but thank you
yeah.
so much to both you. And Jerry Evans, this is such an exciting, like, transitional period for you, and I'm really excited that you're kind of in this new chapter, and moving out of town, as they say. No, that's awesome.
To the water, even, you know. I mean,
Yes, yeah,
I live in a
100%.
house where I'm, you know, 10 feet from not well, less than 10 feet. I'm like 5 feet from the pavement, you know, where the
Yeah,
street is, and you know, I'm a semi-attached on one side, and you know, and we're moving to a house that you know, our nearest neighbor is probably 500 yards, and we'll be right next to the water, you know, the estuary there in Mi'kmaq. First driveway on the right when you come in.
the
Yes, we
dream.
big change. Yeah, our dream
Oh,
home, or, you know, will be our
jealous.
dream cottage or dream home, and my dream studio, right? Yeah,
That's
pumped,
amazing.
stoked.
Stoked. Dead.
Excited
Um,
for you.
Mm.
yeah. Oh, what an exciting time. Um, I think also to kind of get into more of meat and potatoes in the conversation, I think it'd be cool to talk a little bit about, like, our respective relationships with St. Michael's Print Shop. I would say, like, the three of us are kind of coming from different generations of people who've been involved in the shop in various ways. Like for me, myself, I, I did my undergrad, my BFA at Grenfell in Corner Brook, and my focus was primarily in printmaking. I was taught by primarily in print media by like Marlene McCallum and Heather Lear, and always being like aware of St. Michael's as this place for printmakers in the province, and like that was kind of something like I was taught about while I was in school.
Yeah.
And when I was kind of finishing up, or I just graduated, they have like local visiting artist residencies, and being from Corner Brook, I was selected. And so I did my first visiting artist residency at the Printshop in 2018, like kind of like fresh out of school. I was also just starting my curatorial practice, and it was really an exciting time, like kind of like, my first time away from home to kind of make this body of work. I was thinking about my family who migrated to Crow Gulch, like when the paper mill was just getting started up in Corner Brook. And uh, Also, I applied for the Don Wright Scholarship and I was, spoiler alert, I got it.
What?
I know. Can you believe? Yeah, so I was the 2020-2021 Don Wright Scholar because I was still in like the
Wow.
bracket of like 2 years
Yeah.
having finished your degree. So then when I kind of basically did much better prints of what I was testing out in 2018, and just thinking about how long these kinds of bodies of work take. And so St. Michael's has been really, really supportive of me as like an emerging printmaker. And I had like this exhibition and like the studio space, and it was amazing. And I mean, also during my Don Wright residency, like this was also during the pandemic. So having flexibility to do my other like day job at the time and make this body of work, but then also kind of having access to the collection in a more regular way, so I could start kind of seeds of research for all of the basically like the curatorial work I'm doing now, and thinking more about the collection. So that's just kind of my relationship. And I've just been really lucky to have this with St. Michael's the last 6 years. So I guess I was just wondering for each of you, like, how did each of you come to have a relationship with St. Michael's Print Shop, and what impact did it have on each of you as an artist?
Okay. Oh,
Who's first?
I mean, Jerry Robson went last time. How about you go first, Jerry?
Sure, I'm the old guy here.
We're gonna start. I mean, I'm the youngest, so I technically started first, but we're gonna return to the elder here.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned in my introduction, I mean, I graduated in 1986 from NASCAD. And when I came back here, St. Michael's had just moved to its current, well, its home where where it still is right now, and on Harbor Drive. And I mean, I was so lucky and fortunate, I mean, how many people graduate from our college and especially printmaking, and they're done and they move home, and you know they can't afford a press, or there may not be any way to make printmaking other than some simple relief printmaking and that. But I mean, I was able to
yeah.
dive right into lithography and etching and what have you. The only thing that was missing at that time was silk screen, because they didn't have the room really to set it up. But I mean, I was so fortunate to walk into that studio with Peter Walker was there, Bill Ritchie was kicking around. Don Wright was kind of had stepped back from when it had moved to that place on Harbor Drive, but he was still around. And you know, and every summer back in those days, Don Wright, not Don Wright, Don Holman from Queens and Otis Tomasowskis used to come down every summer and spend a month at working at St. Michael's, and they would still stay out and they had been doing that when the print shop was in St. Michael's, in the community St. Michael's. in the old schoolhouse there that Anne Barry purchased afterwards. And they stayed at Tracy's Pinch, which was Bill Ritchie's little shack up in the woods there. And they would just come down and print make, right? And I was lucky enough to work alongside those guys during their stays in the summertime. And you know, I worked at a job because I had a student loan to pay back. But I mean, St. Michael's was just a godsend for me, you know, and it being a cooperative, you know, and not unlike the you know, our college situation where there's traffic all the time, people coming and going, and you know, you're feeding off them, they feed off you, you learn something from them, they learn something from you, and it was just an overall, you know, heaven for me. You know, it was great, and you know, I'm still you know, still able to progress and hone my skills to the point where you know, after working with people like Don Holman and Aldous Thomasowskis and later George Maslov, who came down with them, ventured to Newfoundland in his first trip. He came down with Don Holman, and he ended up staying afterwards, you know, and made home out in Cornerbrook, being the shop tech at Grenfell out there. You know, back in those days, you know, it was a busy shop, but I mean, it operated, you know, always on a shoestring, and it was always that possibility that the doors were going to close at some point, you know. But
Yeah.
never had, you know. It's been there now for what, 40 years, right? And
50
good on them. But
years.
ideally, it would you know, it would be great if they could find a I don't know if they'll ever get another place with a view like that, but they need a ground floor with a, you know, with a flat floor, not a, you know, the creaky spruce floor on the second floor of a building. You know, we have all those big stones and everything. They have to move around and so on. But yeah, I mean, for me, it was a great place, and I made do with what was there, and you know, honed my skills. And the people like Don and Ann Barry, who I worked alongside with, you know, they recognized my abilities, honed as they were, and said that I should get a chop and start printing for other artists, you know, and that's what I did. You know, Don and Otis said, you know, design a chop and we'll get it made for you, and you can start printing for people, you know, and join that long tradition of you know, being a so-called master printer. I've always had a hard time, you know, that term, but you know, I spent many years down there, you know, busting a couple stones, but you know, pushing my body to the limit, printing for artists from here, artists from away. I mean, you know, I got to the point where artists from away came to work with me, you know, but yeah, it served me well.
Amazing. Yeah, so for folks who one day may have access to look through all the prints in the collection, or even if you've seen, like, let's say, like Etched by Wind and Water, like so many of the prints that were like in the exhibition. Jerry Evans was in the show, but he also had printed, like, I would say, most of the artwork in that exhibition
Yeah.
as well. So it was just really special to kind of also, it's special to hear about like your long-term relationship with the shop. Yeah.
And I should mention that, you know, being a master printer, and well, in like you just said, every printmaker who works here and makes an edition of prints has to leave two for the shop. One they keep as a permanent record, and the other one they sell as a fundraiser. And but being a master printer, I got paid monetarily, but I also got printer's proofs as well. So, you know, all the years I printed for Ann Barry or Jerry Squires or Scott Gowdy or Joseph Norman from Chicago, who came out to work with me, you know, I got
That's the name I was going to ask you about.
Oh yeah.
Sorry. Yeah,
But I mean, I
yeah.
have a great art collection, you know, and if I could liquidate half of that, I mean, I could be just handing over, you know, cash hand over fist, and you know, I wouldn't be looking for a mortgage for a house. But you know, I mean, if I could liquidate half of what I still have, but you know, it's great. I have a great art collection. Yeah, mostly on paper, but yes.
You're gonna need an archivist, Jerry, to go through everything and take a look at that.
Yeah.
And how about you, Jerry? You know, I mentioned briefly in the beginning that you were the Don Wright Scholar as well, but if you can just go into your relationship with the print shop.
Sure. Yeah, it's in multiple parts, but I feel actually it's kind of great because it falls in between to both of you, and I
Mhm.
have connections with both of you on both sides.
Right.
Um, so yeah, like you, Emily, when I was at Grenfell, for me, and this also will tie to Jerry, but I remember being at Grenfell and people like Anne Meredith Barry coming through, and George Masloff was the print tech, and for me, St. Michael's was like this mythical place, that you could go away for those of you who are really interested in print. And at that time, again, being from rural Newfoundland and hardly having ever left the island, uh, St. Michael's was like both mythical but like attainable. It was like close. Like moving to town was going to be scary, but there was a place there that might be like a way that could sort of integrate into that community. So in 2000, um, yeah, I would have been finishing up. Yeah, I did. I finished up in 2000, 2001. So somewhere around there, someone would have to check. But I think I was the Don Wright Scholar of 2000. And at the time, I was back in Pollard's Point working in the shrimp plant down in Jackson's Arm. And I remember being so nervous because the shrimp season was going so late. And I phoned up St. Michael's and was like, I know I'm supposed to come out, but can I like postpone my residency? And they were like, of course, yeah, yeah. So then it would have been in late 2000, early 2001. I moved to St. John's. I had this Don Wright scholarship, and Jerry was in the shop. Jerry was there as the master printer and shop technician. And it was my very first professional thing that I did post BFA. It was the first residency I had. It was like I was moving to St. John's, and I was still
Which
gonna
is
have
the
to find.
canon event for folks who aren't from Newfoundland and
Yeah,
Labrador in the audience. Moving to St. John's is like a canon event in every kind of young person's life if they don't go to the mainland. It's like it's
I've
a
been
big
to St.
deal.
John's twice, maybe ever.
Yeah.
I've been to Halifax more than I've been to St. John's.
Mhm.
Halifax was less driving hours from where I was.
Yeah. Yes, on the West Coast. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you'd lose that time on the ferry, but that was a break. But we could get to Halifax in less time than we could get to St. John's. And yeah, and again, I arrived in St. John's and Jerry was there, and that's where I first sort of found a community. And looking back, I'm not particularly proud of the work I was making at that time, but it didn't really matter. It was just like I was there. I was the Don Wright Scholar through my association with St. Michael's. I became, heavily involved at Eastern Edge, and for a while was on the board there. And I'm not sure, again, someone who was, but back in those days, the Don Wright wasn't a full year. And I don't know if Jerry's ever heard me say this, but I've said it to many people. I often say that I was the first full year Don Wright scholar, whether it's true or not, because I just hung around. And then, I think back then it was either 6 weeks or 3 months or something. But when my time came up, I went to go give Jerry my keys, and he was like, "Are you going anywhere?" And I was like, "No, I'm just sticking around town." He's like, "Well, you can keep your keys. you can keep your cupboard. You're gonna keep working, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess so." So I just kept my keys and my cupboard, and I had a keys and cupboard. I know it's different times, mind you, but I had a cupboard there and keys to St. Michael's until I moved to Montreal in 2003. And then I'm off in the city, and a whole other new experience. And then when I was finishing up my grad work in 2008 at Concordia, I was in fibers and material practices. That was my department. But when it came time to do my thesis project, I knew there needed to be a printmaking element and a printmaking component. And again, I was making work that's very much my work. And I felt like if I was going to make work again about community, about ideas of like loss and longing, there was no other place that the work should be made than St. Michael's. So I reached out and I applied again for a visiting artist residency at St. Michael's. And I went home and I made all the work all the monotypes that became the sort of substrates for the drawings, and everything that I made for my thesis work in the woodcuts. I made it all at St. Michael's. So, and in those days, there was a different crew there, and St. Michael's had changed a lot. But I came back to St. John's, and again, I think it was like a month or 6 weeks just living in town and working on what became my MFA thesis project.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, when you have an organization that is 50 years old, there's like so many iterations of like institutional knowledge and who the director is and like the artists who are kind of like that community at the time. Like St. Michael's has kind of gone through all these different shifts and phases and growth. But I think what's
Yeah.
really awesome for both of us is that Jerry Evans was there and kind of like, there is the master printmaker. And I mean, I remember starting my visiting artist residency and seeing Jerry in the shop, and even as the Don Wright scholar, like so many of, your prints, Jerry, after 2020, 2021, 2022, watching them just appear on the drying rack every time you had like a new layer done on your lithos, like magic. Like, yeah, I love that. That's you've been like this key figure kind of for both of us as like a core Printshop
Yeah.
member. It's really
And it was
special.
so cool with the exhibition that you curated and was at Union House when I was there this summer. I was able to come up and I said to either you or Drew, I was like, I was in the shop when Jerry made that litho. I remember
Yeah.
Jerry working on that litho. That was so wild, so cool. Yeah.
Oh, love it. Um, and like oh, go ahead, Jerry. Evans, I think you were gonna say something. You unmuted.
Well, I guess a lot of people could say that, 'cause, having been pretty much a permanent figure there, over the years, had some downtime for different reasons, but I've always I've been there since '86, basically, off and on. I used to say I am St. Michael until Mike Conley stepped in, and he was obviously St. Mike.
Right. He is a Michael. That is true.
Yeah, that's right.
So kind of having like this background knowledge of the shop, and I think both you touched on it very briefly, but maybe you could share a bit about the significance of print media and multiples in general in your practices, and maybe how you came to printmaking and how did that grow and change over time into other modes of creating in your work, like for you, Jerry Robson, with textiles and fiber arts and things, and Jerry Evans, you with painting, and then also like digital media and things like that. So yeah, the significance of print media multiples in your practices. Maybe Jerry Robson, you can go first.
Okay, all right. This one I've been thinking about because as much as I started very much as I mean I feel like my approach to printmaking was never that traditional in terms of that I was not
Yeah,
very often ever making editioned prints or anything. And as much as I love printmaking and I love that that was never the material output that I was motivated to make. But
same.
I got really into woodcuts in my undergrad. I love woodcuts. A woodcut over my shoulder, not mine, but Ali Louagie, former student. Uh, so I was really taken with woodcut in my undergrad, and I remember that was like sort of the first thing that I got really into in my BFA. It was like it was the first thing I got, and the first thing I really took to materially, and it made sense to me. I remember at that time, again at Grenfell, I mostly worked under Kent Jones, and printmaking and particularly woodcuts was a place where, although like this is a little bit of sort of revisionist thinking maybe, but I think it was coming from a rural community, coming from a logging community, and coming from the West Coast where logging, and I came from a small, not by no means a commercial logging family, but a small logging family. I grew up on a sawmill. Woodcut was like the thing that made sense. And I remember just being materially really into it and loving the residue of having like the block after I had like printed. And then as I sort of moved on, I got super into mono prints as I said. And then if I think about printmaking, I just love the language, like the visual language of a printed image. I love that there's something in it. There's times when I will use a printed mark when it's absolutely not necessary. Like I could have drawn it, I could
No.
have painted it, but I want the printed mark.
Yeah,
And
100%.
that's really, and I still occasionally, I'll occasionally be like, all right, I need to do a woodcut. Like every few years I'll have an idea for a woodcut and I'll just get back in the shop and make a woodcut. But for me, it's probably about, again, the sort of like work ethic of print that I really like. I really like repetition in my making. If I think of like my multiples, I've made a lot of like zines and things when I was younger, so that's for the multiple. But I think of like my objects, the objects in my installation, whether it's a ceramic object or a wooden thing that I've made, or a objects that have been painted and flocked. If you look at it, they're a system of multiples. Like one, there's always repetition of form, there's always repetition of material. And this conversation was one of the ways that I was able to sort of think about that. When you gave me the question, I was like, what is my relationship with printmaking? Why do I like printmaking? And why do I like multiples? So, I've done things in recent years where people who know my work might know I'll make a series of like ceramic objects and I just wrap them with a fathom of twine. That sort of wrapping, that ritualistic, like every single object is wrapped with a fathom of twine, is something I think similar or akin to a printmaking way of working. And then
100%.
yeah, and then the other thing, like you saw me, I was at Union House all summer, or I was very fortunate this year to have a leave from teaching. I was going from residency to residency and place to place, and I usually always find my way back to Newfoundland most summers. Um, and I was carving all summer and couldn't quite get to what I was going to do with these wood carvings, and now I've started inking them up and printing them, and that's sort of a funny. It always comes back to printmaking in some way. I feel like whenever I'm pulling together like a final body of work, there's always some element of either the printed mark or the repetitive mark making. I guess that's ties my work to printmaking.
100%. Yeah, I started laughing when you were talking about like, when you're like, well, this could actually be like a drawing or like something, because when I was in my undergrad, I had a supervisor who primarily worked in photography and digital
Yeah,
print, like did not was not a printmaker. And
yeah,
my final grad work was like literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photopolymer prints that each were cut out by hand
yeah.
and made into like this larger sculpture and installation. And he said, why are you just like printing it by hand? You can just like print it in the printer. And I was just like, you are not getting the process. And I mean, like, that's what it is for me. It is the repetitive action. It's the way your body feels when you are reproducing each individual image that is ever so slightly different. And for me also, like, textiles and printmaking are so entwined, like
Yeah.
materially and thematically and conceptually. And yeah, so I was just thinking, like, even when I'm not printmaking, I'm always it always goes back to printmaking, and also coming from a family like similar to you, like in logging, but in Corner Brook, for folks who don't know, it's like a paper mill town basically.
Mhm.
And like I've had 4 generations of my family working at the paper mill, like everyone from like great grandparents to my brother. Um and just like thinking about repetition and spools and like industry and production and the body and labor and all of those things, like, yeah, very much. Yeah, that prof did not get what I was doing, and that's okay.
That's okay.
That's okay. How about you, Jerry? Maybe you could talk about, you touched on it very briefly, but I'd love to hear more specifically about significance of printmaking and your practice and how you came to it.
Well, it's everything you guys said for sure, but I think for me, it's, it's having been into graphics, drawing, that whole thing of, having that tool in your hand and making that contact with making those gestures that, just that action of mark making and so on, I was a painter too before I went to, I knew nothing about printmaking before I went to NASCAD, and I was introduced to it, there, and I just gravitated towards, probably because of that, but also, and all those reasons that you guys pointed out, but also because of the tactileness of it, the smells but it was when I have a stone or a plate, I might have an image in mind, I might have preliminary drawings, but when you make marks on that matrix, you don't know what you have until you pull it off on paper. You ink that thing up and you pull it off on paper. You smell those inks. You hear that noise when you take that lick with the roller and so on. And I guess it was all the nuances too that you had to consider, attention to detail, and the alchemy of it, and it was just so it was inspiring, to a certain level, but it was just if you made a mistake, you printed over it, but you worked with it, because with certain aspects of printmaking, you can't go back, you have to make it work or cover it up, or and that was nice too, to have that jarring sometimes, especially if you're doing multiple layers. And but I mean, when I started printmaking, especially when I came back to Newfoundland, I mean, I I made prints because I had no other way of making images. I didn't have a place to paint, so I made prints of it. Hence, editions of 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 10. But of my own work, I've never ever really printed any. I've never printed an edition bigger than 30 of my own artwork. I printed editions of 150 for other artists. As many as that. But you know, and I guess the other thing about it too was the practicalness of it. It wasn't a precious object like a painting or a carving or what have you. A printmaking is it's a multiple. It's it's more than one. As a master printer, it's my job to make them look exactly as humanly possible. From number 1 to number 30. But especially if you're printing for somebody else. Me, not so much. But you hone your skills, especially when you're printing for other artists, and you make them happy. And you have to have that personality too to work with others. There's some people I've worked with that I really enjoyed, and there's people I've worked with that I did it for the money. Because I don't, I'll work with them now, but I'll never work with them again. But anyway, the thing about the multiples and not it being a precious object, and if you're trying to make a living, and if somebody's willing to buy it, it's more affordable, other than a painting, and these works where the works on paper, you can also you get your work out there, you can have you can have several galleries represent you if that's that's the way you play it, or more people can have that image. Instead of just it being that one piece that you make and you sell and you never see again, unless you have a slide of it, or it's published in a book or something like that. But printmaking for me was on many different levels a good thing. I was able to make a living from it, printing with other artists, and it was a great vehicle for and medium for what I had to say in my art practice. Whether I'm working with photographs or the range of mark making is quite endless. With different mediums of printmaking, especially lithography, which is probably the most technical and difficult of all the printmaking mediums. But if you once you get it, you get it, and you can really push the limits and employ different mark making processes and employing photographs and text or what have you. It's just yeah, it's quite it worked for me.
I mean, too, like with your work, Jerry, like, I mean, like thinking about lithography, to me, it is the most like painterly of the print media, like
Yeah.
except for monoprints. But like when you think about like particularly stone lithography, like I was taught stone litho by Marley McCallum, and like all the different like washes you can make, or even like with the crayon, like all like what you were saying with all the different layering and mark making and building things up. And then the small heart attack you have when you're waiting to etch it, and you're like, is this gonna show up on the stone? And it does, like magic. And it's just um
It is like
it's
magic.
it is magic. Like I think the word you said that was so great was alchemy. Like you are literally
Yeah.
transforming this rock into this beautiful matrix to you constantly repeat an image. And um yeah, for folks out there, if you ever get the opportunity to learn how to do stone lithography, it is just like there's no printing process like it. I'm really attached personally to like photopolymer, and like because I do like photography and stuff, but like oh gosh, there's nothing like a good stone litho, and like painting on this like baby smooth surface and etching it, and it's perfect. Yeah. Um so like with thinking about printmaking, like or to kind of go into like the next question, Jerry Evans, your retrospective, well, Jesse, curated by Janelle Duval, will be traveling to other areas of Mi'kma'ki soon. And for others who don't know, we did 3 shows together this year. It's been a very busy year for you and I, which I'm very, very, very grateful and honored for. It's been awesome. And the 3 shows together, including Etched by Wind and Water at Union House Arts, where Jerry Ropson was recently the visiting artist in residence. And we had a lot of great conversations about the exhibition and the artists who were in it, and that was really special for you and I to have those chats about it. And Jerry Robson, you are recently completing your residency and have been on sabbatical, and were recently part of the group exhibition at the Grenfell Art Gallery, A Love So Deep, It's Etched in Stone, curated by Logan MacDonald. So thinking again about etching in stone and etched by wind and water, like there's all these kinds of themes kind of, I think, emerging from exhibitions at this point, thinking about place and things. So, in reflecting on each of these exhibitions and time periods of artistic creation, how has and being from Ktaqmkuk influenced your practices and what you choose to make work about? You talked about it very briefly, but maybe just to elaborate more on it. And maybe Jerry Evans, you can go first this time.
I mean, I might have moved here to St. John's when I was 12, but before then, lived in central Newfoundland, and I spent a lot of time on the land, picking berries, snaring rabbits, trouting whenever I had the chance. I mean, I was catching trout first when we moved to Mount Pearl here, and up where the Dominion stores and Canadian Tire, and that used to be one of my favorite fishing trouting spots here. But you know, the land has always been very important in what I have to say. In decolonizing this place, in referencing our ancestry, our stories, and what have you, and it's just I don't think there'll be a time when I'll not have I'll be stuck for something to do, for something to speak to in my art practice, And I'm so looking forward to getting back out there again and, being next door to the land,
Yeah.
There's a dump, there's a dump 2 kilometers from my house in Con River. That kind of freaks me out a little bit. And there's bears there all summer long, and ours will be the first door that they come to in the fall of the year, looking for a handout. But that thought about having chickens there is kind of iffy, and but so looking forward to getting back getting back to the land and to being immersed in my culture, to being next to language speakers and maybe, I'm hoping to uh, have some payback down there, to give back. Because I've spent, a lot of time in Meowpoogic for years, for generations, or not generations, for the last, decades there. And then that's been a source of my inspiration and subject matter, and it's my second home, and I want to make it my first home now, and I want to give back to the community, and I'm hoping to uh, set up shop there of my own, but I also want to set up a community space where I can work with youth who are interested in printmaking, and yeah, I'm stoked to get out of here and get down there and get to work.
Amazing.
I don't know if I answered your question. I can't remember what it was anymore.
No, I mean, I think you did. I mean, honestly, Jerry, like, to me, as like I guess I'm an elder youth now. Like I'm 28, like technically according to the government, if you're 30 and under, you're still a youth. But I mean, everything to me you've done over the course of your practice and artistic career has been like also giving back in a lot of ways, like to me, like you've been so generous with up and coming artists like myself and, like Jordan Bennett and Megan Mizzou and, um, and even in other community members and peers like Nelson Wet. Like I'm just thinking of people like, you've done a lot of work that's paved the way for so many of us
Hey,
thinking about being Mi'kmaq, what that means from Ktaqmkuk and all the nuances and complexities, and also making that work in a time when not many people, if anybody, was making that, having these very difficult conversations and thinking about that in a creative way. So,
it was hard.
um,
It was
yeah,
hard.
yeah, it was.
I was here doing that, speaking to what I was speaking about, and there were some people listening, but I
Yeah.
mean, I was doing it first and foremost for myself, because it was a language that was familiar to me, and it was a way that I reflected in things that I learned I mean, if I was a writer, I probably would have been writing about it, or if I was a singer, I would have been singing about it. But having spending a 2 weeks or 3 weeks in Con River in February in 1989 or something, with junior, um, learn how to make snowshoes, with who
Mhm.
would be, from a guy who would later become my father-in-law,
Yeah.
and but coming back here to St. John's and then making this big print about how to make snowshoes and taking the notes from my journal and employing that into the image making, and just because that's where I worked and what I worked with and that's what I did, and if somebody wanted I made 7 of those or what have you, and if someone wanted to buy one, that'd be great, and a little pocket money, but I was doing things back in those days for myself. I still do it for myself, but you know, um, I guess um I didn't have a lot of peers back then, other than
Yeah.
uh, uh, extended family and so on. Because I mean, there were very few of us here. I didn't know Nelson. He was probably close to
Mhm.
my age. I didn't know him.
Mhm.
I don't think he was really doing his art practice at that time. But I had the opportunity to have, there were people who knew of me, and I got invited to Nova Scotia, and I spent time with Alan Sillaboy, who I briefly met at NASCAD, and later became good friends with, because we used to meet every year through Nations in a Circle, myself, and that's where I got to meet Todd Labrador, Charles Doucette, who I knew from NASCAD, the Dose Christmas, and Ned Bear, Shirley Bear, and people like that. Get to hang out with them for like 2 or 3 weeks, and that was my time away from here. That charged me, that gave me that drive and confidence, and my batteries were charged, and I came back, and I made work again, and because there weren't a lot of people speaking to things I was speaking about here in the way I was doing it, and because of the way we were still, there was still a big uh, fight of we're still trying to get recognized as Indigenous people here, and and all of that played into that equation, and putting that work out into galleries, and having people not understanding it, not understanding our history, because we were trying to understand it ourselves to a certain extent, and I guess I did blaze a little trail now and again, for you and few, and and having said that, I mean, you guys have been so inspirational to me, and I wouldn't consider myself an elder, but I'm certainly not a youngin anymore. But the term uncle fits quite nicely, and I'm comfortable with that.
Uncle Jerry, yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Hey.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so yeah, Jerry, if you could chat a bit about, how being from the Ktaqmkuk influences your practice and how you choose to make work and what you make work about.
Sure. It's so interesting to hear Jerry talk, because he talked about getting his batteries recharged, because that's in a way what I think about when I go home most years. I mean, my relationship with it is always sort of an interesting one. I always say, like I said, my work, for me at least, has always sort of challenged ideas of belonging to a place, and I've always sort of been uncomfortable with that idea. The thing I've come to say more in recent years is that, like, rural Newfoundland is the place that authored me. I I can't not I can't not think the way I think. And because I'm an artist and someone who makes some, even when I try to make work that's not about that place, it'll always be informed by it. Always comes back. It's always, like I said, that rural working class way of thinking, the way I think about material, the way I relate to place. It's always on a very, like, immediate um level. I always said, Jerry's talked about getting his batteries recharged. I always have joked over the years in other artist talks and things that, like, Newfoundland's my woodshed. I gotta keep going back to. When things get cold, I gotta head back to the shed and come back with another armload of wood. And that's the sort of way I think about it. And it's funny, I haven't lived in Newfoundland since 2003. That's wild. And yet at the same time, I will always sort of be in conversation with that place. I've been very fortunate since coming to teach in Mi'kma'ki in 2010. I've been, again, very fortunate to go home every summer. Go home. My immediate family aren't there, but anyone who's heard me talk about anything knows that I go home to see my Nan. I'm home every summer hanging out with Nan. Nan's boy, hanging out with Nan for a bit. I've had most Christmases home with Nan, and yeah, it's the place I return to. It's the place where my work is in dialogue with that place. Like I said, even when I'm not making there, I'm always sort of in dialogue with that place. In the Newfoundland art community, of both sides, both those who came before me, like Jerry, and those who are a bit younger than me, like yourself, have always been so kind to me as an artist. So it's a place that I've always felt welcome, always felt recognized, and again, always in dialogue with. And the other thing I think about, which is when people ask me, and I think maybe Emily, you've heard me say this before, but like having come here as like an educator and I understand the sort of perceptions that come with sort of being an educator in a post-secondary university. But I moved here again to Mi'kma'ki, and I'm always Jerry the professor, which I'm all so uncomfortable with. Was as Jerry talked about being the master printer. I'm like Professor
Yeah.
Jerry is never. But when I go home, I'm always just Jerry from around the bay, and I love that. I'm just Jerry from out in Pollard's Point, just Jerry who's making his weird little things, and it's like I said, I keep a studio there in the summers, and I've been very fortunate to go back there most years. And it informs my work so much. It's like I said, I can't not make work that's informed by that place.
Yeah, I feel like that too. I mean, even like I technically haven't made like new work, like new artwork in two, 3 years. I mean, like curatorial practice has been really kind of my main focus and kind of researching, but it's like
That's
everything
work.
I that is what yeah, that is work. And the thing is I do see that as an extension of
Yeah,
creative practice. Like when you're doing that archival work and like putting prints together and thinking about how things speak together visually or conceptually, and honestly, like everything I do, like it always comes back to Ktaqmkuk and wanting to do work for this place and community. Like a dream would be to just keep making art exhibitions here or keep writing about this place because so
yeah,
much of it hasn't been written about, or it's been written about in very particular, often colonial lenses about
yeah.
this place. And yeah, it's very important, and I think that really shows up. And yeah, I think so kind of leading into the last question, I just kind of wanted to chat a bit about like whether y'all know it or not, or informally or formally, like both of you have had like really huge impacts on me, like as an artist or thinker. Like I think about when I was in my undergrad in 2017 and I saw your exhibition, Jerry, To Kiss a Goat Between the Horns at the Rooms. And it was honestly like so profound and like really meant the world to me to see that, because I think, we've talked about art being from Newfoundland or of this place. And I think a lot of the time it's very like popular if you're an artist, let's say from a place not from Newfoundland, you come here, it's very popular to make art about the rural landscape, like to make art about Newfoundland and Labrador experiences, romanticizing
Yeah.
that experience. It's a very common thing. And uh, to be in our provincial art gallery and to see an exhibition that spoke to like grief and place and repetition and materiality and thinking about community and in different ways of storytelling by a person from this community about this community, and just like the visual language and sensibilities that you had, I was just like it just meant so much, and it just like blew my mind as someone who was in school. And I mean, like my final work was like text based because I was like, how do I do text work, but that's not copying Jerry, but it's similar to Jerry, things like that. So it's like, I mean, you've had a huge influence on
Thank you. That
me as
means a
a
lot to me.
person. And Jerry Evans, I mean, like like just like you know you're on my body. You're like Jerry tattooed me, and so much of your work has been, like we talked about just then, like in service of community knowledge and of Mi'kmaq history, of Ktaqmkuk, and like just talking about how hard that was in making a place, like really just paving the way. Like honestly, like having the privilege to work with you like so intensely the last couple years, and also writing about your work and working together on 3 exhibitions has been, it's been life-changing. And I love you so much.
Love
So
you too.
my question for both of you is who are to kind of cap it off, kind of final question for the combo. Who are some artists and mentors who've had an impact on your artistic journeys or you personally and how you move through the world? Yeah, Jerry, you go first.
Well, I mean, I think first for me, I mean, we talk about like getting back to charging the batteries. I mean, I got I made my first venture down to Con River, and and being so welcomed there by Mizel Joe and others, and just sitting around drinking tea, for days, and talking, and language books being on the table, and people answering my questions, and just ask, and then asking simple questions like how do you say this in Mi'kmaq, or what, and having journals and taking notes, and just being just going there and being a sponge. I mean, I used to drop when I was at St. Michael's. If I had an opportunity, and I was probably mostly, I don't think I was in a serious relationship at the time, but I used to drop everything, and I'd say I'm going to con, and I'd be gone for a couple nights, and sometimes I'd be gone for a couple of weeks. I was only coming back one time, and it was the dirt road then, and I lost a ball joint, and I had to stay another 2 weeks. But I was always welcome there. There was a Jerry's room at Mizel Joe's house, and it was awesome. You know,
Yeah.
I couldn't have asked for anything better because even though my relations lived an hours away from there, or what have you, I could not get from my blood relations what I was getting from there. And
Mhm.
yeah, um, that had a big impact on me, and that kind of put me on a path, but also getting approval from family, even
Mhm.
though there were some that didn't want to talk about it. But and it was that time when I first, I think I first had my first, I first showed this work at the LSPO Hall. It was a group show with Jerry Squire, Sharon Puddester, and Jim Miller at the LSPO Hall, and I first showed these images I was making at St. Michael's with, probably nobody ever seen before, these types of marks and with double curves and quill work and so
Mhm.
on. And it just so happened at the opening was Peter Clare and Shirley Bear, right?
What a awesome. Yeah, I'm just thinking about what it would have been like to be
Oh my God.
in that space. Sorry,
Yeah.
just to quickly mention, I had class yesterday for my Indigenous curatorial class with Dr. Carmen Robertson, who I'm very fortunate as my supervisor. But we were going through the art collection at the Carleton University Art Gallery, and there are so many Shirley Bear works in that collection. And we also have some, of course, in the St. Michael's collection when she was a visiting artist. So that's, yeah, I was just thinking a lot about Shirley yesterday, and I knew we were going to have our conversation today.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
what a special circumstance that they were there at your opening. That's
And
awesome.
she gave me one of her pieces, and it was of the strong woman, the petroglyph, and I
Yeah.
brought it to Christina Parker, who I was with at the time, to get framed, and
Mm,
I haven't seen it since. They lost it. Broke my heart.
yeah.
That was a long time ago too, but it's still, I mean, I can still see it, and it's like,
Yeah. Yeah.
fuck.
Yeah.
But I mean, things like that, and like I said, going to spending time with peers in Nova Scotia once a year or twice a year, or crossing paths, on a jury somewhere, but you know, Meow was my place to go, but being here in St. John's, I think the one person that kind of mentored me was Anne Meredith Barry. I worked with her
Yeah.
so much, over the years, and I have a lot of her work. I've made books with her, and big wood blocks, and small little etchings, and nice elaborate lithographs, and so on, and we sat and we talked. We talked about work, and we talked about choices in color, and things like that, And, we spent that much time together, and she trusted me that much, I'd be working with her on a print. And she'd, maybe I was at a shop at the time, but she came in to look at a proof, and she would have color swatches. She would glue it to a proof that I made, or she would, mark it up. I like this color, or you can maybe just add a little more red or whatever and then she would go, and I would check her notes and then, carry on, and then I'd mix up a color, and I'd proof it, and I'd say, and I call her up and said, Ann, I mixed up that color, and it's not working. She said, well, if I could change it, make it a little more red. So, she trusted me to make those kinds of decisions in making her work in that. And she would look at my work, and she would say, well, it was very personal, and because we had we had some good deep conversations about what I was doing, what I was trying to say, and
Yeah.
so on. And she really understood me, and she got me in, she opened some doors for me too, and I got to go to Ireland. I had a show there because of her. And when she passed, I mean, it broke my heart. Because she's got I found out she was sick, and before you know it, she was gone. And someone asked me if I would speak on a CBC interview about her, and I couldn't do it because I'm not. I knew I couldn't have that conversation without bawling, crying my head off because I'm like that. And but yeah. So I'm kind of speaking to that right now because she was good to me. She was really good for me, and yeah.
Thank you for
I'm
sharing
hoping
that.
folks, and seeing you guys now, the young and up and comings. I mean, you youngins are amazing. Jordan Bennett, I mean, look what he's doing. Shit, you know. Yeah, it's awesome. Looking at the way things were and the way things are, it's it's chalk and cheese, and it's good, and it's all good, and yeah, it's awesome. That's me.
Thanks, Jerry. And how about
Thanks.
you, Jerry? Who are some of your mentors and people who have shaped you?
Huh. I was thinking about that because when I think about that, there's like big names like or sort of like artists I've always revered or artists who are big influences on my work. And I think I could just go down a list, but I'm not sure how useful that would be. I often, when I think of mentorship, because I teach, I think of like my teachers, the people who taught
Yeah.
me. And I was thinking of like at Grenfell, my days at Grenfell, like Kent Jones was a really big impact for me. He was, I guess, the first professor who, in my mind, took me seriously and let me know I could do this. And then Barb Hunt, who was there, who was only there as I think only a sabbatical replacement during my time at Grenfell. But I always say, a guy like me going off and doing an MFA in fibers it wouldn't have happened without Barb's early influence.
Yeah.
And then Jerry said it, and although you and I had a chat this summer, I was reminded of Sharon Puttister. Man, when Sharon Puttister came into Grenfell, I think she only taught there for a year, but boy, did she kick our asses. And I was telling this story at Union House this summer, but she was like probably the first professor that she swore on me and I swore back at her. And I had a moment and I left the room. And then later I came back. And after that, she took me serious. And she was like, but still not, she was always tough with me. But she was like, someone who early on was just like real tough with me. But at the
Out
same
of
time,
love.
but also made me feel like I could make work about the things I wanted to make work about. And I think I should name, like, in grad school, I worked with like Ingrid Bachmann, Francois Morelli, Patrick Traer, Adrian Norvid, these people at Concordia who were really important educators. But for those who've ever heard me, I have rants. I have these like series of Newfoundland rants on my phone. People have heard me, whether it's like complaining about Michael Crummy or various things when I go on about Newfoundland. I have a rant on my phone, which he doesn't even probably even know, but some people have heard me read. Reed, when I think about like mentorship and I think about like what kind of teacher I become, Jerry Evans was a huge influence in that way. I remember getting at St. Michael's and the way Jerry was so approachable, had so much knowledge, but at the same time he spoke to me on my own level. Like he made me feel like an equal, even though I didn't feel like an equal. I felt like a little shit because I was a little shit. But I was going to ask Jerry about, I was like, remember that artist who would come up from Chicago? I have this memory of him being in the shop and Jerry saying to me, come on, Jerry, we're going to go have lunch with him. We're going to go over have some Indian food. And he's going to, and that guy was telling Jerry and I stories. And I was sitting there, and I'm like all of 21, 22 years old. And I'm just sitting around a table with these, like in my mind, like these two artists. And they're just like talking about art making. And we're bullshitting over lunch. And anytime during my time at St. Michael's in those years, as anyone who came through, whether it was like local people that I got to know, like Boyd Chubbs coming into the shop every few days, and Jerry Evans being like, all right, you got to come talk to him, Jerry. And it was just like when I think about sort of the again, the type of educator I wanted to be and the type of artist I wanted to be, it was, I think I often think of Jerry and the way Jerry was in the shop. That was like a huge thing for me. There were educators that I've encountered who, and maybe my students wouldn't agree, but there was educators I'm always trying not to emulate for the way that they were unkind or ungenerous. And I think about how generous of spirit Jerry was when I was a young artist, again, just fresh out of rural Newfoundland and not having a clue, but at the same time felt like made to feel at least that I had something to contribute. And I think that's really significant.
Think of that. I mean, I could mirror that with my relationship with Jerry Squires first when he started coming. I got a lot of Jerry Squires stories, but I won't get into that today. But I can't help but mention Bob Rogers at NASCAD too. That kind of held my hand there too. And especially because he was the Tamarind guy who graduated from Tamarind in New Mexico and Albuquerque, and he was a master printer himself, and he was good for me. Tell me how to buff that down real tight. All of his. We used to sit and have lunch together at in the printmaking studio. And he smoked cigarettes and I smoked the pipe. And we drink beer in class, and it was awesome back in the day.
Wow. What a time to be
I had my
alive.
high school art teacher, Robin Cook, and when I went to Mount Pearl Senior High in Mount Pearl, Robin Cook, he was a graduate of Ryerson back in the day, and when he graduated, and he was a graphic designer, and he came back to Newfoundland. He had a student loan to pay back, and they made the Department of Education made an agreement with him to be taught for a year or two. He wouldn't have to pay back a student loan, and he taught until he retired, right? But I mean, the school in Mount Pearl had everything. They say it was dream money. You'll have to look that up. I can't explain. But they had a kiln. They had I did soapstone carving in high school. And I won first prize in the arts and letters. And we had painting. We had easels, and we probably even had a printing press. But I can't remember ever doing any printmaking back in high school. But it was he was good. He coaxed me into going to. I first went to trade school here in St. John's, but after I graduated, I wanted more, and he coaxed me into going on to NASCAD, and unbeknownst to me, I didn't know about West Viking College in Stephenville. Didn't know it existed, because I probably would have went there, right? But I went on to NASCAD because I didn't know about West Viking College. There was no internet back in those days. Yeah. Anyway, that's it.
Wow.
Yeah. I think it's these types of conversations, having people that you can talk to, like throughout a career. It's kind of wild to think about. Like I still sometimes think of myself as, like I said, young Jerry and
young Jerry.
I'm getting up there myself, but it's crazy to think of like all that. Yeah, it's been like 25 years nearly since I've known Jerry Evans, and I've known you for a few years now. It's having these like artists that you can have conversations with throughout a career. You mentioned Logan earlier, Logan McDonald and I
Yeah.
met at Grenfell in 1997, and we're still talking shit at each other about art,
Yeah.
nearly 30 years later. It's just like a constant ongoing thing, and having people that sort of can speak the same language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any, I'm trying to think of back in my day in
Yeah.
art college, it's only, I mean, of all those students, there's only like maybe two on one hand, that you still
Yeah.
have a relationship with, and know that they went on to do some, art practice of some sort, But what happened to the rest, I have no idea.
Oh man. Wow, my heart, I feel like the Grinch when his heart grows 3 sizes too big. This has really made my day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, if there's any
Malalia.
if we have, I think, well, we're coming up close to 1 o'clock, so maybe if there was like one or two kind of shorter questions from anybody. We had a lovely message from Drew in Georgia who said XO XO XO, love you guys, which we love you too. And do we have any other ones? Yeah, are there any questions that folks would like to ask? There might not be. We talked about so many things.
I mean,
yeah, I think we were pretty thorough with everything.
yeah. Thanks for
We
doing
do
that. You
have
did such a good job. It was so seamless. It was.
I mean, like that's well, I mean, like it's the three of us. So I was
Yeah.
like, I mean, like when we were planning this, I was just really grateful that folks said yes, and I knew we would just have like a good chat today. We did have a nice message here from Charlie Young. Love the Bob Rogers shout out.
Hey, Jerry, you still printing?
Not very much these days.
I haven't
A little
printed in
bit.
2 years, dude. I haven't printed in 2 years. I've been
Like I said, I'm just inking stuff up, inking up little sculptures and using them. Again, it's printmaking, but it's not. I'm just printing my sculptures on textile right now.
pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I
Yeah.
I had to step back from St. Michael's because of my knees, and I was lucky enough to get I've been working digitally, if you believe that, the past several months. I did a mural for the city that'll be installed next week.
Cool.
Big times. I can't wait to see it when I come home.
Either.
Christmas time. I'll be back probably December sometime, like when the term is over. So I'm
I have
looking
a press,
forward to.
yeah, but I'm looking forward to getting the Converve and getting set up, because this place is empty now. We got half of our stuff moved out there already in a container and in the house and in our son's place there. And I don't even have paper here anymore, and all my print cabinets are gone. They're all out there now in the house. And yeah, it's been 2 years since I made a print, basically, and I'm pumped. I have a Praga press, and St. Michael's was gifted one that they've gifted to me, which is a Conrad tabletop litho press, Conrad etching press that I'm stoked about. Working on plates again, and maybe getting a couple of little headstones or something to do some stonework on, and there's always silk screen and that I could probably set up a little shop with some students that out there. Yeah, I'm gonna get back into it so bad.
Amazing. Wonderful.
You've been on here for a couple hours. Your house probably sold.
It might have.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I'll snatch that up in no time.
No, not sold yet. Actually, to be honest, I don't think it's even listed yet. It was supposed to be, but, I haven't got the notification yet.
Well, thank you so much, folks. Oh,
Thanks.
sorry,
you.
Emily.
Oh no, I was just saying thank you to Malia who attended the conversation. Malia says thank you all for this conversation. It's been very meaningful. Thank you. It's been oh, I had like a really hard week this week, and the beginnings of grad school and stuff. Like a lot of it's been really fulfilling and exciting. And then I'm taking two curatorial classes, both are taught by Indigenous women, and it's just like amazing and it's been really awesome. But then there's been other kinds of academic challenges, just kind of getting back into learning after like being away from school for 6 years. So it's been like kind of a rough week. And yesterday was really great. And this conversation just filled me up in such a good way. So like, yeah, I'm really just grateful for our time this morning slash afternoon, and grateful for you both, and thanks just so much for a lovely chat, and I can't wait to talk to both of you soon.
Thanks.
Love you much.
Love you
See you,
too.
Jerry.
Thank you,
See
everyone,
you,
for
Jerry.
joining us.
Thanks for tuning in, folks.
Have a good day.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Bye.